So want to get started?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Welcome to Sunday Night Live. This is our weekly call for the Humanity First movement. And what we are, well, our vision is that we're a future where data-driven government prioritizes intrinsic human value and quality of life. So what we'll run through tonight is an overview for new folks. Then we have a Slack channel spotlight. We'll explain what that all means. And then the actions update, we'll talk about how we got Barrington Martin 2 on the ballot, how we were part of the effort. Humanity First Day, Basic Income March, and then we'll have our candidate spotlight, Jen Perelman. After that, we'll have a hang. So we've begun, and we'll go through these slides, and we can have one question per person per slide. Use your
Can you turn off the doorbell sound when people join?
Yeah, I just did.
You did, okay, great, nice. And if you, where you can click on your participant in the slide panel, there you can rename yourself, so you include your state after your name, so we know who you are, where you are, and chapters we can connect you to. All right. Good. So for new folks, what we are is a network that evolved out of the Yang 2020 volunteers. We're working with Humanity Forward to define and grow the energy, vision, and the community that began with a campaign. We aim to harness and convert the passion of the Humanity Forward movement into something sustainable that can drive us to grow through 2024 and beyond. And we'll connect you with folks into your state and local area. We'll onboard you onto our Slack, and we watch movies together and hang. So we've been seeing movies every Friday together, watching on Screen Share. And the movie this Friday will be announced on Facebook and on Twitter when we have voted upon it. Okay, nice. So some different ways that we spend time together in hangs are, there are humanity hangs, Tuesday and Friday nights. There are regional hangs that happen sporadically, organized by the region. And we have virtual phone bank parties too, organized by different chapters for their campaigns. And the links to get involved with your chapter, to humanity hangs, for Zoom parties and events, all of these links are going to be available for you in one of these slides. Here. All right, so to connect with your state chapters, go to our website, hfmovement.org. You'll click on your state, and there you can join your chapter. In dark green, these are all the chapters that have activated websites, and the green ones, including the light green, are all chapters that are active at this time. So here are some of the links, including the link to these slides. So I suggest you save that link so you can come back to the slide presentation for all the information that's coming at you here now. All right, currently active working groups. I'm going to turn this over to Massey. Will you give us a rundown of the groups that are currently active?
Massey's not here yet.
Oh, not shown up yet? Okay, good. Well, candidate support is mostly helping to organize phone banking and help to, well, we bring on Jen Perelman tonight. That was part of what we did with this organizing. And communications deals with all of the outgoing messaging, creating the website, the tweeting, the social media platforms. So that one is a lot of fun to be part of. Tech is all of the back end, everything that runs well that you don't see happen is tech. Onboarding, I think self-explanatory, bringing you into the organization. OM management is also something behind the scenes. That's all about how we create a sustainable organization that can scale up, have long-term growth. Diversity, inclusion, and outreach is making this organization one that where everyone feels really included, and bringing people into it. That's actually a really broad, really exciting working group. I would suggest going to their meeting Thursday night at 9. It's really hard to encapsulate what they do, and it's excellent. Regional organizing is building out the state chapters. Testify for UBI, we're going to be going to Congress in September and testifying for UBI, meaning testifying for how that would impact our lives, why Congress should pass it. And it's not too late to get involved and contribute testimony to that. And finally, we have lots of issue working groups discussing some of the issues and policies and how we can implement them, even at local levels. And okay, so some tools to get started. And again, in that page with all of the links are links to these tools. You can join the Slack, which is this middle one here. And if you haven't joined the Slack yet, you can also just go directly to the Google Calendar to get the links to the meetings, like the diversity inclusion meeting I just recommended. And there's also a document that explains what the Slack more directly tied to Humanity Forward is doing and what our Slack is doing, and those different ways you can be involved, all in the same mission. All right, so again, we organize through Slack, and now I'm going to turn over to Jim McBride, who is going to talk about one of the channels that's newly created. So, Jim. I saw him enter. He's around. Is he unmuted?
All right, sorry about that.
No problem.
So just so everyone knows, I'm going to give folks a lot to think about. And so I want to give you a sense of perspective on my background before I get started. I do have over 20 years in communications and politics. And I've worked for award-winning PR agencies. I've also worked in politics, like for the International Association of Firefighters, and then migrated into Young Dems, becoming a leader in that world, grassroots with Obama and helping start the Virginia campaign for Obama in 2007. I've been involved in different progressive movements like Occupy, and I've been in Netroots Nation, and was involved with Bernie. And more recently was named communications director of the DC, Maryland, Virginia Grassroots Coordinating Committee, which works with grassroots groups to win elections. And more recently, I was a political director of Northern Virginia Yang Gang, and kind of representing Virginia in many of these events. To give you an idea of what my political philosophy is and how it influences my background, I am kind of a moderate libertarian. And that has fit in well with being a Democrat in Virginia, because I think that's kind of the kind of politics that has succeeded with Obama and the Virginia Democrats that have won most of the statewide races since 2005. Now, the first slide that I want to get to, well, actually, the first slide here is a summary of some of the different aspects of the community that political and civic engagement can help with. We can probably, from our work and from our sharing of information, probably be helpful to every working group and channel that we have. So if you go to the next slide, I guess I can advance it myself. Okay, sorry, I wasn't used to doing it. Am I managing the slide myself, or is somebody else doing it?
Should be on the next one for you.
Okay, could you go back one? Okay, sorry. So I want everyone to think about what does 2020 success looks like. And then this is where the channel fits in. Now, Andrew Yang recently said, apparently, that we want to elect 3 members of Congress that are kind of humanity forward candidates. And then we're going to have a bunch of mayors and legislators as supporters. And there's a lot of momentum on our side. But we also want to avoid not just having a handful of representatives around the country or like a UBI squad that is kind of isolated. We want to integrate and embed our movement throughout democratic politics and throughout the country. So what I want people to think about is, can we get the results we want for our candidates this year, but also build relationships and build a foundation with over 200 members of Congress, over 50 senators and governors, all the state parties, local party committees, thousands of state legislators and mayors, thousands of party members, and have a nationwide movement driven by voters and the media that is popular enough to become a groundswell for change and hopefully basic income. So if you go to the next slide, could somebody advance the slide? Okay. So think about how big social policy change happens. We're doing things like endorsements and lobbying, but you also need a lot of support from the base. You need grassroots Democratic donors, for example, and Democratic volunteers. You need in the media, in the culture, you need to have a strong base of support that moves legislation forward and moves candidates forward. And what I'm talking about is using the democratic ecosystem to move us forward with especially those last two groups and maybe number one, the base. Because that's something that I think we can do a lot more with. And if you go to the next slide. My solution is simple on how we focus. Think about building the base based on what would Andrew do. And I think today was a great example of how big an asset and a role model Andrew is. Al Franken interviewed him on his podcast, and he said, "You were the only human being on the debate stage." And he had amazing things to say about Andrew's ability to be a real person and a real leader during the campaign. And I think there's a lot of things that we can translate through our work nationwide and go beyond our targeted races and really be part of our communities and be our own Andrew. If you go to the next slide. I think we should definitely double down, get the Yang Gang back together in the sense of following 5 keys to Andrew's success, which is his data-driven solutions, UBI, his humanity-first values, the human-centered capitalism, the belief in a kind of a forward-minded message that is inclusive and kind of lighthearted and charming, his belief in having a strong movement that's, supported by social media and, yanging people and things like that. And, but also one very important key that maybe relates most to what I'm talking about is he's a team player. He has been straightforward for Biden. He definitely wants to beat Trump. And he has said on TV that that's his number one priority. But in the meantime, he has also made great relationships with a lot of people in Congress. Senator Harris and Tim Ryan in Congress have been big supporters of cash payments, even though they haven't been coming out for UBI. And Andrew, with his role on CNN, is getting free airtime to promote his vision on a regular basis. Next slide. So we can definitely make a big difference on the cultural side. We know how to do that by spreading the Yang brand or the Humanity First brand. We can maybe do more, and I'd like to talk about ways we can do more on the digital side and through things like relational organizing, which a lot of campaigns are using right now. But I want to talk a little bit more about the political side and the things that are a little bit more in the weeds. But I'll try to keep it short. Next slide. Basically, we can build our political base by working with elected officials, party organizations, campaigns of all stripes, young Dem chapters, grassroots groups. And a lot of times they do partisan organizing, but a lot of the things that they do are, potentially nonpartisan. Meetings where you can make an announcement about something Humanity First is doing. Maybe they do community service events, especially after the election. They work with technically nonpartisan advocacy groups. And there's a lot of civic, like voter registration and educational trainings on organizing that you can get out of being parts of these kinds of groups. So I think our key political goals from working with these groups is thinking about how does it work? How do all these groups work? How can we be helpful to the big picture needs of these groups? Keep in mind that there are big elections coming up, and maybe we can be an asset. Maybe we can offer skills like technology abilities and things like that. And then how can I have my ideas used and my voice heard by these groups? There's a lot of things that I think we can be an asset on in terms of human resources, the idea of Humanity First as a way of running an organization, ranked choice voting. And the real benefit of all this is not only do we have some common political and civic causes, I believe, we can also build a lot of political power. We can be very visible. We can build our personal networks. We can be leaders and kind of shape the future of these organizations. We can contribute our skills and ideas that we think relate with our movement. We can learn a lot, get a lot of resources, and bring those lessons learned back to our organization. Now, next slide. And so this is just a list of some of the examples that I've tried to do in Virginia. We had our Yang Gang chapter meet with Senator Kane's office this past week. That was kind of a direct, our group directly being involved in the political process. But, I've had semi-direct participation in the party and campaigns recently. I asked a question of Senator Warner at a special private meeting with grassroots leaders about the cash payments. We got UBI and cash payments resolutions passed at our state convention. I think we got some good candidates elected to the DNC. You might have noticed I was on the Mike Bloomberg Fox News town hall where I asked a value-added tax question. And I actually got involved in the CNN town hall that Andrew Yang had in 2019 because I was on the DC Democratic Party email list. So kind of being in the loop can be a real asset. And indirectly, you can do a lot of things where you're just networking, working with organizations. I've worked with the DNC and other grassroots groups a lot, and have built relationships that way. And that's just indirect power building that you can do, and then you can leverage later on, even if you don't bring up basic income on your first visit to a meeting. Next slide. Now, here's an example that I'm concerned about. So Marco Rubio ridiculed the People's Stimulus event a couple weeks ago on Twitter. And this is kind of there might be some discussion and lessons learned here about how, in this case, an elected official did not like the method of outreach that he was getting. So we need to have discussions about what works and what doesn't work. And especially on the Republican side, it's very easy to trigger them and get a negative result. So, on one hand, persistence matters and being direct matters. But on the other hand, maybe with Marco Rubio, we need to emphasize different messages or different tactics. Next slide. So kind of going back to the beginning a little bit, these are 5 political lessons that I think can make you a trusted messenger, and all of us trusted messengers, because the key is building trust. And it takes a lot of work in the Democratic Party to build trust and build allies. It's not terrible, but it does take some work. So, and this is especially advice that I think I'm going to give in the future to young progressive activists of all stripes. But I think we have know these lessons pretty well in the Yang Gang, but I do want to just reiterate them now, that we should all act like we're on the same team. Remember that in many cases, we're all voting for the same candidates. So in the end, we need to build relationships and try to unify different factions that might exist, especially in the Democratic Party. Focus on common sense solutions. The moving forward theme I think is very helpful. Sharing our values in a positive way and not in a way that comes off as negative and angry. Being authentic and transparent, like being data driven and focusing on math, I think is a great way to build credibility with your message. And also in terms of math, we need to also just always be mindful of the big picture. Where can we get the most bang for our buck? How can we build majorities to win elections or pass legislation? We need to really focus on being relevant and knowing what voters care about. I think that I have one more slide, I believe, that I'll share the link. I over time, while in the car, when I hear something in the news, I think of different political cliches that I think are always true if you really think about it. Things like it's not what you know, it's who you know. You got to know the rules before you break the rules. You got to have a seat at the table, or you're going to be on the menu. I like the idea that politics is show friends, not show business. The customer is always right is true with voters. Killing them with kindness is a great customer service motto. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. If you're explaining you're losing, I think is an important one. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. And the key in the end is to play chess while they play checkers. And so some of the themes that I wanted to share are the kind of themes that I want to bring to an outreach strategy to work with the Democratic Party, learn how the political process works nationwide, and support our different working groups and state chapters to be an influence throughout the country. And so we diversify our efforts and have a bunch of thousands of allies in 2021, and can hopefully pass UBI and make it a reality. So that is I had a lot of brainstorming today in my mind, so I just put it all down, but I can talk about it more or give you more information in the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jim. That was great. Again, you can join his channel and join the activity with him by joining the Slack.
And we'll do a kickoff of some kind. I don't know if it's a working group yet, but I think maybe we'll do a Zoom meeting at some point, and I'd be happy to coordinate with folks on setting that up.
Nice. All right. Yeah, the main difference with the different channels is some are more thinking groups, discussion groups, creating groups, and then there are action groups who create actions are called, that things that you do out in the world that are visible and engaged. And some of our next actions we can talk about. Joshua Frick, are you here to turn this over to you and tell us about how some of our social media push got Barrington Martin II on the ballot?
I am here.
Right.
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of make this short and sweet to give you guys a little bit about my background. I grew up a Republican. I am what I would call a right-leaning independent, but I am very liberal with my likes and retweets, and I would encourage everyone to do that. It actually kind of is a little bit mind-blowing to me. Some of the more active volunteers I see in the Yang Gang, when I ask them, they're like, oh yeah, I don't have a Twitter. Twitter can be so important in particular targeting mainstream media reporters. So we have these congressional candidates that we want to support, and a big way to get them attention is through the mainstream media, you know, the local newspaper, political reporter. So in this particular example, when Barrington was covered for the special election, I got a kick out of this. The reporter said, Barrington has amassed a fervent following on social media. So that was like, yes, somebody's paying attention to all these likes and retweets, you know? And I remember during Andrew's campaign, they always said on CNN, like, boy, the Yang Gang really gets after it on Twitter for Andrew, you know? So people do pay attention when you like and retweet, and it's free. I mean, I actually used to think like, okay, if I like and retweet too much, I'm gonna lose followers, but I don't lose any followers. It just helps the candidate that I'm supporting get a little more visibility. And yeah, so just don't hesitate. There's another really great way is to find a group that you can be in, like a group DM chat. I have one set up so that we can drop in important tweets and we immediately go and like and retweet them. It's been really helpful. I got that idea from Paige and the Herzog campaign, so thank you, Paige. So if you want to join that group, let me know. I will add you, and just be very liberal with your likes and retweets and help people out.
All right. Coming up in just 2 weeks is National Humanity First Day on Saturday, August 15th. Now, I just want to turn it over, Zoom hands. Is there anyone particularly excited about this? Who would like to speak on it? No?
I can if no one else wants to.
Yeah, yes, please.
Sure.
Jenny.
So Humanity First Days during the Yang 2020 campaign were really awesome. There was the one like big official one, I believe, in November, and then there were follow-up ones in different areas in December and January. And they really were really impactful for the volunteers and for the people around them and the effort they were doing. It's not necessarily make a big action in your town and have every news reporter agency, everyone there. Like that would be great, but it's not necessary. It can be something as small as getting together with like 2 or 3 people to pick up trash on the side of the highway, or doing some kind of small donation drive for a food bank. There's a lot of different ways that we can give back even while being socially distanced, even if it is just sending a message out there saying something on social media about how you're supporting people locally or how you've gotten support from people that can help you. There's a more info that's going to be coming out about this shortly, and there is a channel on Slack for it, I believe. So we'll have more to share as the week goes on. So keep your eye on our social media.
Great, thank you. And Jenny, how about continuing on Basic
Sure.
Income March? Yeah.
Yeah. So the Basic Income March is a yearly event that Income Movement puts on. It's international, and there are locations that are popping up all over the country. We'd love to have one in every state. We're hoping to get this to coincide with the Testify for UBI action, so that it'll be a huge, big push for universal basic income right before the election. And the reason that this is so important, especially now, is because the big marches that we're used to seeing in a pre-COVID world won't work in COVID world. So we have to think a little outside the box. Yes, you could totally get together and march, but there's also options for doing art installations, be they like static or like paint a mural of some kind or painting on a sidewalk, or they can be interactive where there are like cards hanging from a tree and people can write like what UBI would do for them and hang it on the tree. So people walking by can just see like all of these different messages about how basic income would help. There's also the option of doing like multiple street corners. So like if you don't have a whole lot of people, you have like 2 or 3 people on this corner, and then the next block over you've got another couple people, and they're all holding the signs. So it's this repetitive message that people are getting as they're going down the street. You can also do a regular march. You can do a car honking parade, a bike parade. There's a bunch of different ways to do those, and there's a lot of additional information on basicincomemarch.com and on their Action Network page, which Christina has linked in the chat. And they have a meeting every Monday night. I think that's 8 Eastern. I don't know, someone in chat correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 8 Eastern. And the information will be, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific.
I'll add that
Cool.
information
Thank you,
to the
Christina.
slide.
Zoom link will be in the
Yeah.
chat.
Great. All right. Okay, other action we do is so much phone banking because again, in the COVID world, canvassing is much less accessible in most states for most people. All right, so there are 3 different ways that phone banking shows up in this organization. So Humanity Forward organizes them, and that's with the team leads. Wednesday night, if some of you, I know some of you here were at the phone banking event for Jen Perelman, where Jen was there for the kickoff herself. And then also just yesterday, California campaign volunteers and California Humanity First Movement State Organization volunteers organized a phone banking party. That was really well done. I would recommend going to more of those phone bank parties to David Kim, to come to more phone bank parties with Jen Perelman. If you go into HFM National is organizing them. So that's myself along with Joshua Frick. Neither of us are in Florida. We're not part of a Florida Yang Gang, and it doesn't matter if a state doesn't have a chapter yet, because there are people from other states who will step in and make a phone bank party for our Humanity Forward endorsed candidates. Yeah, stay tuned on our Facebook and Twitter. We're going to be posting when the phone banking parties will take place. All right, yeah, so we have been keeping data on the results of phone banking. Shout out to Serene F, who's been calling every day for Marilyn Strickland. Hi, Marilyn. Serene F is in your corner. Gray Black and Keith L. I've been calling consistently for Robbie Goldstein in Massachusetts. Joshua Frick, Candy B, and myself, we've been calling for several candidates, such as Jen Perelman. Loving that. I'll talk more about campaigning the calls for Jen Perelman quite soon. Here are the candidates who we have coming right up. And more candidates that we're supporting. All these are endorsed by Humanity Forward. And now presenting Jen. Going back to what I said about how she's such an easy candidate to phone bank for, is that she's a very popular candidate, given that she's running against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Most phone calls go, once they learn of her, once they learn of like, there's another Democrat in the running for this nomination, and they said, oh, really? Someone else to vote for than Debbie? Sign me up. And if they're not sure about that, then all you have to say is that she wants to expand Social Security, because a lot of the voters you talk to in Florida are older voters. So once you drop that, they're on board. If you haven't phone banked very much, this is definitely the campaign to start for. A lot of really positive reception from voters. I'd like to actually turn over to Jen now. Because Jen, do you want to continue about your policies here?
Sure. I mean, do you want me to do like a brief intro or, about the campaign, or do you want me just to go right into, you had like affordable housing? Oh,
sure.
wow. I'll
Yeah,
trust it.
we can go to, yeah,
Now
we
I
can
just want
do,
to hire you. This is like the best presentation I've ever not had to do. This is
okay.
unbelievable. Wow.
Yeah, so yeah, if you want to go over more generally, and then I can slide back so you can go
Sure.
deeper into that of housing policy and others.
Because I thought I would talk a little bit about how my campaign came to be affiliated with Humanity Forward, like why me, considering
Yeah.
based on the first two speakers, I think it was Jim and Joshua, I'm probably on the progressive end of things for sure in terms of everybody in this group, but we are a service-based campaign. About a year ago when I've been doing this now for 18 months, and about a year ago I decided that I really needed to spend this year showing this district what congressional representation is supposed to look like. So my thought is, if I spend this whole year and a half talking about myself and we lose, then I've wasted a year and a half of my life. If I spend a year and a half doing service and build up a service organization and a coalition, then I have spent my time really well this past year and a half. So win or not, we have an organization, it's called GenCorps. We have been doing service long before COVID. That has complicated things for sure for us. We've had to move around some organizations that we work with, but we have always been a service-based campaign. And the concept is that really everybody is entitled to live with dignity and peace in their lives. That's what this is about. So whether it's, I mean, UBI is definitely one thing I know we all agree on, but it's this premise of a social safety net for people to live. And also, by the way, recognizing that we cannot have capitalism without consumers. So when I, and as somebody that's a progressive, and I tend to get called all sorts of things like, you know, socialist and communist and all sorts of other things, but really I'm a capitalist when it comes to non-essentials. And the reality is we cannot have a capitalist economy without consumers. And right now, as we're seeing, we are struggling to have consumers. So we all, for whatever reason, we agree that people should have a social safety net, whether it's economical or whether it's moral. We are all having a common thread here. And that's something that's really cool. And I appreciate being on the left side of that. And I appreciate people on the right side of that. And I go to Republican meetings because the reality is when there's common ground, we need to come together on whatever those issues are and move forward. And the problem is so many people with their purity tests are missing people that could be helpful allies in certain areas. So I have a whole Republican club that I met because we were campaigning against drilling in the Everglades, and they are on our team with that. So just because they don't agree on, say, Medicare for all with me, doesn't mean I'm going to discount working with them to get a banning on fracking in the Everglades. So it's just, I think that that is what is so special about this, and why I feel so privileged that Andrew reached out to me and saw the value in what we're doing, even though I tend to be on the progressive side. And I think what it comes down to is that we are people that believe in science and reason and putting humanity first. So it's really, it's not complicated. We don't all agree on all the policies, but when reasonable, unbought people come together, it's really quite amazing what you can come up with. And I think that the lack of corporatism and that whole concept of really returning seats to people instead of corporations is something that until we all come together on, all the policy discussions in the world are kind of useless. So that's sort of our first and foremost is service and getting the corporate money out and providing a social safety net. And then if you want to talk, I mean, did you pull slides of certain things? Like I saw you had like our housing slide or something up. I mean, I wasn't sure what issues you really wanted to, like what you want to focus on. Okay, so, all right, well, we could talk a little bit. That's my district. You could see how ridiculously gerrymandered it is. That encompasses southern Broward and all the way down to encapsulate all the wealthy Jews down the coast. And that was purposefully cut that way by Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz in conjunction with Mario Diaz-Balart, which is beneath us. So he's a safe red and she's a safe blue. So we are a plus 12 blue district. So we're pretty much all that matters in our race is the primary. And so that's really what we're facing here. And we are now a little more than 2 weeks away from that. And we've already had a lot of people voting because we have a lot of people that vote by mail here already, even pre-COVID. And our early voting starts tomorrow in Miami-Dade County. So yeah, we're sort of at the end here and we really need a final push. So we need money and we need volunteers. It very, very clearly. And yes, some parts of Hollywood are part of my district, but also parts of Hollywood are cut out of my district. I was just responding to the pop-up question. So it is gerrymandered. So you could see that little cutout that comes up in the white into the center from the south end. That is Hollywood that's cut out of my district. And that is the part of Hollywood where you have your more, let's say, working class people that Debbie was cutting out and putting into Frederica Wilson's district. So yeah, it's been like a game here. So our platform is one of
Bye, Kapana.
I'm sorry, what? Is that good? So we do have a progressive platform. And that, you know, we do, I mean, our big issues are Medicare for all, climate crisis, and criminal justice reform. And like I said before, obviously, until we get the money out, all of those things are sort of a moot point to even discuss. But we do believe healthcare is a human right. And when we talk about eliminating a profit motive, I want to point out that we really see three areas that should not be for profit, and that's healthcare, public education, and corrections. And right now we have all three of those things that are for profit, and that is just not serving us at all. So while I have no problem with capitalism, there are certain industries that we believe need to be taken off of the table. So I would say that's really what that is. I mean, this is from our door hanger. I appreciate that. Yeah, so we do support, I mean, and a lot of this, for anybody who is interested, if you are interested, I am a brand new Congress candidate, and BNC supports something called the 21st Century Bill of Rights, which is essentially what FDR completing what he had originally set out to do and complete that. So there were certain things that were not handled in terms of like healthcare and housing. We do believe in a jobs guarantee. We do believe in a living wage. We believe that anybody working a full work week should be able to afford to live with dignity and peace. And that this is something that's completely doable. And the only reason we don't have this is because the for-profit middlemen have taken the money out and have also paid off our Congress people to sort of keep the whole system churning as it is. So we believe all of these things are completely doable. They're not even really far left. In any other country, I'd probably be right in the middle. And yet here I'm somehow the radical left. So, you know, it is, I guess, whatever, it's all relative, wherever you see yourself on the spectrum. We just think humans should be treated with dignity. It's crazy. Yeah. So that's basically the gist of my in a nutshell. It's usually better if we work off of questions.
Oh, yeah. Gray?
Hey, Jen, super impressed by your pitch and your campaign. I saw that towards the end there you had a thing about national rent stabilization. This is something that I've been a little curious about on like what national rent stabilization or how you affect housing at a national level. I've lived in places as poor as Oklahoma, and right now I'm living in Boston where the housing markets are just completely different. And so how do some of those policies play out?
Yeah, you know, this is one of those things that is different place to place, and it really does depend on the location. So there is no one size fits all for all different locations. It's this concept of, you know, for years we had places that had rent control. That's not something that's unheard of. We've had that before. It doesn't necessarily have to be public funded housing, but it has to do with everything is sticks and carrots. Everything is funding, either subsidizing or taxing. And what we need to do is we need to incentivize the good behavior and punish the bad behavior. So we need to incentivize developers to offer affordable housing. And you do that by giving them breaks when they offer affordable housing. There are so many different means, but generally when you're talking about the federal seat, you're talking about using funding to control state and municipal governments in terms of getting them to do what you want them to do. Right now, we incentivize wrong behavior. We allow, especially in Florida, and I can speak very specifically about my district, we allow overdevelopment and gentrification, which I'm sure is similar in a lot of places, so that people can't even afford to live where they work. That's unacceptable. So when you're having a community of people that can't afford to live in a reasonable vicinity of not only where they work, but also outside of our food deserts, which is another huge issue for me, but just in general, creating housing. We have the housing. We have so much empty housing. So when you have empty housing and you have homeless people, that's a failed system. So there are ways to incentivize the behavior of offering available housing for people, and rent stabilization is really just one means of that. And to me, I think of that in terms of whether you do it through rent control, whether you do it through offering subsidies to developers to create affordable housing. There's different ways to create it, but essentially what we're saying is that everybody should be afford to live and pay rent, meaning that I believe they say 1/3 of your monthly income should be able to afford housing, and whatever that, this is something where I'm not all policy wonky, but whatever that calculation is that we decide is what should be reasonable, that housing has to be available for people in that community. And there's different ways to go about doing it, but it just really depends on the state and the municipality, and also the type of development that occurs in those areas. But it is doable. There is no reason we do not have controlled, available housing for people other than greed. So to me, it's just a matter of rewarding the good behavior and penalizing the bad behavior. So if a developer wants to come in and they don't want to put affordable housing, or they don't want to have things that they are required to do to, not even just work with our environment, but just make themselves sort of adaptable to whatever that neighborhood's needs are. If you're not going to do that, you're not going to get subsidies. You're not going to get benefits. You're going to get taxed more. You're going to have to pay fees for, whatever it would be, whether it's, similar to what you would pay for polluting. These are all things that need to be taken into consideration when people are developing whatever they're developing. You want to develop a giant mall? Well, you're going to need to develop housing for that. You're going to need to contribute to the development of affordable housing for people to work at your mall. So there are so many ways to do it. I think that the term rent stabilization is kind of broad, but it's just a matter of people being able to afford to live. That's really what it's about.
All right, thanks for the answer to that and fleshing that out for me.
Thank you. So we have 2 more with hands raised now. I have Andrew and then Joshua. Andrew?
All right. Yep. Thank you. Hi, Jen. Great pitch you gave. I have some friends that live down in Florida, so I'm very interested in your campaign. What kind of democracy reforms, if you were elected to Congress, would you push for?
Well, I think that first and foremost, and I've been very clear about this, I support publicly financed elections. So to me, the goal of getting the money out has to be across the board. So I saw something today, someone posted something today like, should millionaires be able to be in Congress? And I have no problem with that if everybody had the equal funding to get there in the first place. So I don't think there should be any private money at all in our system. So when you eliminate private money in our electoral system, you're getting democracy leveled out in a way that it isn't right now, because right now it's the richest person has more of a voice than the poorest person. So when you get the money out, you're leveling the voice. Now, there's also different issues about election integrity. That's a huge problem. That's also a state-to-state issue that I do think should be regulated nationally. But, this is one of those things where there are so many different approaches. Some people think you just got to overturn Citizens United. That was really just the final nail in the coffin, right? So there are so many problems right now. I also believe in 3-month election cycles like they have in the UK. The amount of money and waste that we spend on this is absurd. We've raised over $300,000 on small dollar donations. We're a grassroots campaign, and it infuriates me to no end that I've had to spend 18 months of my life and waste $300,000 to fight a corporate monolith instead of just basically feeding people with that money. So the whole thing is a circus, and it's ridiculous. So my suggestion to get that out is to stop basically kowtowing to the pomp and circumstance and the nonsense. This whole political theater is lunacy to me. It's lunacy. I look at these people now, how anybody believes that the Democrats are actually putting up a resistance is beyond me. I call it Mick resistance. It's not real. It's, you know, it's, we're gonna take down some monuments, and we're gonna give some nice platitude sandwiches, and then we're gonna keep on, you know, financing the military industrial complex and the prison complex. And, you know, so they're not really trying to help regular people. They're just putting on this sort of facade of that they're helping regular people. So how you help with democracy is, first of all, get the money out. And second of all, what I do all the time is I use this space to be the loudest voice in the room at any given moment to sort of pull the curtain down. I have a journalism background, so I'm very much this like whistleblower mentality. And from the beginning of doing this, I just feel like everybody really needs to see behind the curtain as to the circus that's going on in Congress, because you're not going to get it from the media. They're bought and paid for by the same people that own your congressional representatives. So the only way for anybody to even really know what's going on is to rely on a handful of whistleblowers and some, you know, alternative media. And I think that when people are more educated and know what's going on, then they're going to want to have their voice heard more when they realize how they're being screwed. So I really think that a lot of this is just bringing out more voices and getting the money out. That to me is the key things that we need to do when you talk about helping democracy, because right now it's completely commandeered by two private clubs. And until we can get enough people breaking through that, we're kind of screwed. It's a chicken and an egg thing. You need to get enough people in to deal with the election issue, but then how do you get those people in with the election problem? So we're just trickling in there, and it's like chipping away at a wall, and eventually it's all coming down. It's all coming down. It's just a matter of time. The people in charge, their time is ticking, and they're dying off. And there's more of us than there are of them. So it's really just this transition and bringing in young people to do this. And my district, it's so glaring. The generational divide is so glaring that it's just, you know, we just need a few more years and more of a thinning of the herd. And then we'll have a lot more, you know, new people coming up. I see Eileen dug that, but yeah, that's the thing about COVID. I can tell you this with certainty, it affects a lot more of Debbie's voters than it affects my voters. So I know that's a horrible thing, but again, I am a person of science. I can't be not. So that's just how, yeah, I'm not a politician, and it just is the way it is. So I am a person of science. I heavily believe in Darwinism, and, you know, so, you know, to each his own. So
we have one last question coming from Joshua Frick.
Hi, Jen.
Hi.
So I want to say you're very popular. Most of the volunteers that I know have just sung your praises. They're very interested in your campaign. I'm actually going to be hosting co-hosting a phone bank party for you later this week. And I know it's going to be easy to get people to want to come phone bank for you because of how popular you are. So I just want to give you your shout out up front.
Thank you. That's so nice. And I want to tell you guys, this is the coolest thing ever, because really the Yang Gang has been infinitely better and more supportive of me than any really of the national progressive groups. The national progressive groups are not going out on a limb for us. They're not crossing Nancy Pelosi. They're very, they're scared. So we've gotten a lot of like our chapter endorsements, our local stuff, but at a national level, you know, I've got endorsed by Andrew and Marianne Williamson, and yet Bernie just endorsed somebody running for state attorney in my county. 8 people in the race for state attorney, Broward County state attorney, and Bernie endorsed someone who's a good guy, by the way. The guy he endorsed, good guy, like him. But it's like he endorsed the state attorney candidate on my ballot, and nobody even acknowledges that our race exists.
So that kind of leads into the question I want to ask you. So this is going to be a little tough for me, but you just said Cantor's better, or Elaine said that, so that's what I'm going to say here. You know, a lot of us that phone bank quite a bit, like for Heidi and for Jonathan, and you know, it's a lot of time and a lot of effort, and we see that, like, you know, the results were disappointing, but I mean, we still have the fight and the heart to keep going. The one thing that I've noticed, number one, is, you know, I look at a candidate and I spend the time and I phone bank for them, and then when their election's over, it's like, well, where are they? They jump onto a podcast, or they're off on some other mission, and it's like, I'd like to see them supporting the next candidate down the road, right? So I wanted to know what your plans are for that. And then number two, you know, I'm looking at your campaign myself. I know that Tim Canova, it seemed like he did really well in 2016. You have to realize I'm one of these people that Andrew Yang just pulled it off the couch, like activated me out of like not being politically active at all. So I'm not real familiar with all the dynamics of 2016, but it seems like Debbie Wasserman Schultz either plans to win or she's plans to cheat to win. And I wanted to know what your thoughts were on primary day. Do you have plans to have people at the polls to kind of watch and do some polling, or are you anticipating some problems? Because it seems like that could be a possibility.
Okay, that was a lot of questions, but I'll work my way back, but just help me if I forget where you started. So
Okay.
I am definitely concerned about election integrity. I have every reason to be concerned about election integrity. I will say this, since 2016, we do have some variables that are working in our favor. So first and foremost, the supervisor of elections in 2016 was someone who was a friend of Debbie Wasserman Schultz's. They were actually friends. That to me is just the appearance of impropriety, whether or not I don't know. But right now we have a completely impartial Republican appointed supervisor of elections who has no love in our race, couldn't care less. So that's first, which makes me happy. We also have something called a citizens election audit that has been started by our Progressive Caucus in conjunction with the Southwest Broward Republican organization that I brought on board. And they're doing that bipartisan, and they have volunteers, and they're going to hit as many precincts as they can. Now, we did it in March for the presidential primary, and I believe they were able to have people at like 67, cover 67 precincts. And what that does is it's not perfect because you're not hitting every person at every precinct and every race, but it's this really good app that does like a snapshot of what's going on at the polling locations to see if, similar to what Bernie's group was using in Iowa. It's a special app. They did a test of it in 16, I believe, in the Bernie and Hillary in one of the states. And so they approached us. So we're using that. And so that's been something that we're obviously pushing to get a lot of volunteers, boots on the ground for that. And then we're having our own volunteers. We actually have people, we'll be out starting tomorrow throughout early voting. We have 2 weeks essentially of early voting and then election day. And we have been encouraging everybody to request vote by mail, just in case. I have this concern that the way they'll screw with things is to shut down polling places and blame it on COVID. And they'll shut down the polling places in our most vulnerable communities and in places where people can't afford to take a whole day off of work to go wait in line and vote. So which are traditionally my people. So I just have to anticipate that. But really, we're doing as much as we can in terms of getting the word out. And we also have a handful of journalists that are planning on being here and really shining the light on this district and being very loud. So, which is, all attention is good. That's just, I think it's going to really force their hand. And ultimately, when it comes to 2016, there were a lot of other variables, such as I am not Tim. I volunteered for Tim in 16. I think policy-wise, Tim is exceptionally bright. He knows his stuff. He's a law professor. I think when talking to groups, he's great at doing it. I think one-on-one, he doesn't connect in the same way with people. I also think that he lived here for 5 years before he ran here. I grew up here. I'm a second-generation native Jew to this district. And those tribal roots run exceptionally deep. And that is one of the things in this, it's unfortunate, but it's true. Mm-hmm. So there is something about being a hometown person. I'm really a South Florida townie. And there are people especially in our Jewish community, that it matters to them. And it's just the way it is here. And that is one of the ways that she has been able to hold on to that seat as long as she has. And there are certain benefits that I have to being a local over Tim. And remember, even with cheating, Tim came within, I believe, 12 points of Debbie, and that is being an outsider to this area. So there's definitely shenanigans. We're anticipating and being as prepared as we can, but nothing would surprise me. And now you'll have to remind me where you started that question.
Oh, yeah. Well, first I want to say those are excellent answers. And what I was really saying there is there's people who have, low key been like, oh, well, Jen's a great candidate, but she can't win. But I believe that it'd be time well spent. I'd like to see Debbie Wasserman Schultz have to sweat a little bit on the primary date.
Yeah, she is. I'll tell you this. We just got one union to break with the AFL-CIO, which has not happened. Tim didn't get anybody to break with the AFL-CIO in 2016. And we got the iron workers to endorse us, which is huge, huge. And basically, the AFL-CIO here is run by a gentleman who is essentially works with Debbie. They're friends. He wouldn't even return our calls. He wouldn't give us a screening. We didn't even get to meet with the AFL-CIO. And the same thing with the Broward Teachers Union. They ice us out. And we have pretty successfully gone around all of them and met with people in power positions and in important influence positions. Because while they might not give us an endorsement, their rank and file know exactly who we are. And they know that we are the people that speak for labor. And Debbie doesn't come close. Actually, and I'll tell you guys, this is an entertaining story I heard from the communication workers when I met with them. She was actually sitting with them at a lunch meeting, and this was back when she was wanting to fast track the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And she actually turned to a table full of labor and said, I don't know what you guys' problem is with trade agreements. So, and this is the person that they just endorse automatically. So there's a lot of stuff, but we have raised more than $300,000. We've had a lot of really good endorsements. And I think we are very viable, actually. If I didn't have issues with election integrity, I'd be a lot more cautiously optimistic. You know, I mean, she's pretending we don't exist, but yet if you go to jenperelman.com or jenperelmanforcongress.com, they now automatically take you to her congressional webpage. So she has commandeered my name, which is very interesting. And she also just sent out a mailer using my purple. So she's clearly recognizes our existence, but she's walking a very fine line. She needs to get all her voters to come out and vote, but without telling them that there's another option on the table. So she's sort of navigating this without mentioning our existence, but yet she's also very disliked by a lot of people. So we'll see. And the other thing I will tell you this, Joshua, is that in 2016, Tim and Debbie's race was the only race on the August ballot. So the only people that were coming out to vote were only coming out to vote to support him or her. That was it. We now have a ballot that has state attorney, public defender, sheriff, clerk of court, supervisor of elections. Like, there are so many races that people are coming out for. So there is going to be this other vote that might not know much, but they know they don't like her. And that'll be the anyone but Debbie vote. And I know this because I was that vote for many years here.
Do you have any alliances with those other candidates down ballot?
A lot of them, yeah, actually. Okay. I do. I've had a few on my live stream. I have my friends that are, you know, I have my candidate for state attorney. I have a supervisor of elections, public defender, and I've had all of my picks on my live stream with their audiences. And I have made inroads in our Black community here based on really personal relationships and friends that I met through restoring rights to citizens that are previously incarcerated individuals finally got their rights restored down here in Florida in order to be able to vote. And I was very active with that. And it led me into some very connected positions in neighborhoods that I would otherwise not be able to get into. So I have made some, I mean, I know it works this way and it's weird, and it's politics, and that's just unfortunately how it works. But I have made inroads in communities that Debbie couldn't even walk in. So it's just really been a group effort. Like, I'm very proud of the campaign we've run completely. We've served in all the right places. I've triaged all the right neighborhoods. I think that we've reached the people that normally don't get reached and have invited them into the process because ultimately that's who we speak for. So, and I think people appreciate that. You know?
Okay. So
that's
Colleen, can I ask Jen a question real quick? I know you said that was the last one. Can I ask her a quick question?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to say, like, I'm so inspired. I can't wait to get my tank top and everything. I'm so jazzed. I'm a phone bank tomorrow. And I grew up on the Space Coast, by the way. I live in Vegas now, but I grew up on the Space Coast. So I noticed that courage is like one of your watchwords for your campaign. I'd like to know, like, how do you keep that courage, like, in the forefront? Like, I don't know, like, words of wisdom, whatever.
Okay, I have to preface this with saying a certain amount of the ability to have courage is privilege. And that is something that I am in a position that I do have, is I have privilege. I am able to do this because I don't need this job and I don't need the money. And that gives me power that is really pretty extraordinary. I don't answer to any corporations. I never will. I don't even answer to the Democratic Party because they're not helping me at all. So, you know, it's really, that's where I draw power from, the ability to lend my privilege. And that's really what I look at. I did this, this is a cool story. I did this Indigenous peoples training, the Dakota Sioux tribe, which was the Standing Rock Sioux tribe that fought against Standing Rock for however long. They came down and did this resistance training at a university near here, and nobody knows better about nonviolent resistance than natives. So one of the things they said about being a good relative, we call it ally, but is lending your privilege. And so I feel like on a daily basis, that's sort of my mission, is to lend my privilege. And it's really been a privilege to lend my privilege. And as far as, you know, what we're doing, really, I wish I could say, oh, I'm so brave and it's this. Really, I got to be honest, I got 0 F's to give. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've been working in politics and campaigning since before I was old enough to vote. And I have nothing to lose with it. I really don't. I'm sick of their nonsense. I feel like somebody needs to be the grown up in the room. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that people don't call them out on their bullshit every single day. And then you see the people that call them out on their bullshit, but then vote to give Trump increased spending for the Department of Homeland Security. So we'll say he's a madman, but then we'll give him more money. And nobody calls them out. The reporters don't call them out. There are no more journalists anymore. And so if anything, I really view this as more of a platform to be that person and be that voice. And we know that there are not enough of us yet where policy is actually something we could say that's really up close. Look, the DNC just turned down Medicare for all. They won't even decriminalize marijuana, which I can't even begin to tell you how many percentage. It's like 90% of Democrats want to legalize marijuana. It's ridiculous. So we're not moving anywhere fast on policy. But what we are doing is serving our community and being as loud as we can on all of these issues and standing up. Oh, and you would ask me about standing up for other candidates. That's all I want to do. And the difference between me and some of the people that aren't doing that, and I'm not saying this judgmentally, by the way, and I don't know these people personally, but if you're concerned or looking out for the longevity of your career, and even if that is because you truly want to serve the public good, you're still looking out for your career. You're still having to make alliances, make deals, negotiate, make friends. It's a popularity contest because you want to get this committee assignment or this position and whatever. And so a lot of the people that get in there are thinking about longevity. And it isn't necessarily self-serving, but it's longevity. I don't have that. I don't have any issue for longevity. I have issue to get there long enough, train someone, hopefully younger, to come in and do that. And every single one of those people should be mentoring young people, not just out campaigning for them, but mentoring them. And when I see things like they don't even acknowledge that we exist, well, how are they going to pass Medicare for all without more of us? And yet none of them are coming down and putting their neck out because they're scared of Nancy Pelosi. And I've said this publicly enough, so let me just preface that with, I'm not making friends anytime soon going in there, and probably am going in there with like crosshairs on my forehead. So I don't know how effective that is, but it's definitely transparent and honest.
I appreciate you so much. Thanks for inspiring us, and
Sure.
thank you so much for your time today. I know that you probably have other things to do, but thank you for the time. Thank you so much.
No, this is actually my favorite thing to do, is sit around in shorts in my house with a blazer and not be out in 94 degrees canvassing like I would be every day, 94 degrees in Florida with a mask. Because somebody thought campaigning in the humidity in Florida in the summer wasn't fun enough. Let's add masks to the mix. That'll make it so much more fun. I actually appreciate this infinitely more. So more of these meetings means less of me canvassing. So bring them on.
I was hoping to get a question in on China, on what your views are with the growing economic influence around the world and the Belt and Road Initiative.
Okay, this is when the Yang policy wonks start rearing their heads, and I have to sit here and pretend I know everything about everything in economics and policy, and I don't. Here's what I think about world relations. I think that we need to just treat people decently. I think we need to have agreements that treat our labor fairly and treat foreigners fairly. This isn't complicated. I care about human rights. I don't necessarily care about whether or not we agree with all of the policies of any particular government. And that's sort of like what I was saying before about that purity test. I think that it is not our job to agree with what everyone's doing, but I do think that we need to honor and value other nations. I think the fact that we're the bullies of the world is embarrassing to me. I don't have a problem with Russia, China, Venezuela, Iran, any of the above. I don't think that they are in any reason beholden to use our dollar and our currency. I don't think we're the superior beings of the universe. So I am just someone who just looks at all those people and sort of just thinks those are just regular people. All I think about in China is that those are just moms that are trying to get their kids from point A to point B in one piece. Same as Venezuela, same as Iran. So how I think about treating other countries in terms of economic policy, that is one of those that really will come down to me having expert people that really understand all the little details to really help guide me on what would be the best interest of what our general mission is, which is humanity forward, humanity first. So I can't give you specifics. I am so not detailed, educated enough on that. But I can tell you that generally my views on foreign policy are extremely populist. I generally tend to be in line with what most people think when I see any sort of polling. So I don't have any reason to think it would be different. And certainly I'm open to all sorts of suggestions. But really, I just need to be surrounded by people that are on the same mission, that know what they're talking about. And that's really what it is with all of these things. You know, nobody's an expert in anything. I could do infinitely better on criminal justice with you than I can on economics. I'm sorry, or trade.
All right. Thank you, Jen. We're going to turn over to a hang now. And I'd just like to share again about phone banking. Here we go. Phone banking shifts are happening 1 to 3 and 4 to 6. We've moved the phone banking shifts earlier because the 6 to 8 people weren't as patient. And so we were having better calls in the earlier afternoon. And these shifts are Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And again, even though the election isn't for another 2 weeks, campaigns in the time of COVID are different, and because people are mailing in ballots, now is really, it's already like GOTV time. You know, usually it's the last 4 days, but it's GOTV time right now. The most discouraging thing is to call people who've already mailed in their ballots before really knowing much about Jen. So yeah, we'll hit those dials.
Oh, can I just tell people about social media quickly? Because someone who was talking, I think it might have been Joshua, about the importance of the Twitter. And I'm old, so I don't personally do the Twitter. I get yelled at for even calling it the Twitter. But we are at GenFL23, and it is absolutely true that the more you guys like and share and follow, it absolutely helps. Exactly, I do the Twitter. I don't actually do the Twitter or the Instagram, and definitely not the TikTok, but those things are really important. So whatever platform, whatever millennial, Gen Z age you are, like, you know, I'm old, so I'm Facebook, but wherever you fall in there, we need support on those.
All right, yeah, so let's all follow Jen. Good. Yenny, are you going to send us into, it's now time for the hang, so we'll just stay here. If it's crowded, we can go to breakout rooms.
So I'm going to turn off the recording now. Thanks for everyone who's watching the recording.